Well, let's jump right into it. Reddit, I think, has 1 billion monthly active users, something like that.
So a large number. Actually, it's a good question. It's like, okay, who here actually uses Reddit? Who here considers themselves a Reddit user? That always happens. I don't know. It's okay. Well, thanks, Toby.
Well, I want to jump into AI. Start with AI. We've heard from the last speakers. Chris was saying he's seen it and he can't unsee it. Was what we just heard. So, Reddit, as we all know, is such a huge part of the AI ecosystem. So I want to ask, how has AI changed Reddit?
How has AI changed everything? I think at this point, okay, so to start with, we're definitely in the same situation as everyone else here, which is like trying to figure out how to hold it appropriately. I mean, it's a totally new toolkit. It makes everything simultaneously way easier and way harder. For us, I mean, we've used it in a bunch of different ways. I think to start with, so speaking as somebody who's made their career as a software engineer, the whole idea that you can do software engineering without looking at the code is completely wild to start with, right? It's like you just trust the machine. The machine does a better job than you might do, or at least does it a lot faster. We've been very deliberate on how we've deployed it internally. So I think it's kind of a couple different areas that we focused on. I personally, just back up a couple steps. Being a technologist, I've mostly told my engineers over the years, like, don't go with the kitchen sink approach of like throw the hardest thing at it you can. Like, look at the data and maybe try to fit a line to it first and then work your way along. And then here we are in 2026 and like, that kitchen sink's really good. And so it's kind of hard to avoid it. We've been deliberate on it. Like some of the stuff we started with has been on the product side. We've used it to do machine translation. So we can actually take Reddit, which has a huge back catalog of kind of evergreen content, and we can translate it into French and into Spanish and into basically pick your language. And not only do that in a way where, the hard part historically doing that is like you translate it and it would kind of sound like the instruction manual to a washing machine. Right, so you lose all the tone. You just get like a very flat, kind of like boring kind of version of it. And LLMs are really good at keeping context and actually keeping tone, and so that's been really powerful. Another one is it's been great for anything involving operations. And if you think about like a typical operational loop, right, you have like a bunch of tickets or a bunch of things coming in, and you got to have a bunch of humans process it. And the hard part is that like it's work for people because they have to have context to know what the ticket means and how it actually fits into the business. For us, this actually comes up mostly on user safety, for example. So user safety, it's like this piece of content's reported. Is it appropriate? Does it violate any of our policies? Historically, that required a human. Now we can build an entire tier on top of it of LLMs doing the first pass. And they're not perfect, and it kind of goes to the 80-20 rule. But if they're covering the first 80%, well, all of a sudden you've made the rest of the people you have like 5 times more effective. That's pretty awesome. And then, of course, on the product side, we have to think about like what is the way that AI fits into the ecosystem that is Reddit. Right? Reddit's entire shtick is it's probably the most human platform on the internet. Like we actually have people legitimately telling you things, and like out of the goodness of their heart, will write giant long explanations of why you're wrong. And so you want to keep that authenticity. And so now we're kind of figuring out like how do we actually make sure that we also have had a long-standing ecosystem of third-party bots and agents running around doing things on Reddit. Like they're mostly novelty accounts, helping out mods, building tools that are actually useful. How do you set it up so that you can have an authentic interaction knowing that there is an ecosystem of potentially agents? And so we're just basically making them all label themselves.
Wow, there's a lot there.
It's been a while. It's been about 20 years.
Yeah. Well, as CTO and a leader, you talked about the engineers and how AI can code for them. So as a leader of engineers, sort of this is a two-part question. Like, how has your role changed with AI now that the engineers have this AI tool? But then you also touched on how Reddit's a place where human activity actually happens. How do you think about like what work humans should still do?
So I think that for the engineering side, I mean they're very coupled for me because I do spend most of my time with engineers. On the engineering side, so what's interesting is that we're trying now to adapt. There's effectively a well-trodden software development lifecycle we've had for the last 30 plus years, right? It's like you write the code, you review the code, you deploy the code. You maybe find out that it broke, you revert, you iterate. And it's just kind of a big iteration loop. And we're now in a spot where all of a sudden, okay, first off, the writing the code part isn't hard anymore. Not that it was hard before, but like it used to be 10-20% of the time at scale. Now it's like effectively 0. You can write code really fast. So now you've shifted the burden from having to write code to having to review a bunch of code. And now so it's kind of like it's made everyone into this like code vetter in a way where like, well, the code's actually pretty high quality. So how do you just not make people have to read what the machines have generated? How do you prove it out? And so right now, what I'm thinking a lot about is I'm seeing a lot of my peers and a lot of other companies trying to figure out like how do you now patch this cycle to say like, okay, what if we did LLM assisting for the code review? What if we did the same thing on deploys? I think the whole stack is kind of broken. Like I think we have to actually kind of take it from the top and say like, how would you build this deployment model with the tools we have today? What would you like? You might actually be able to do better experimentation directly in production, and have more intelligence around is this breaking, and then therefore revert, as opposed to this kind of torturous cycle of like review. I mean, it's a lot more fun as an engineer. And engineering is ultimately it's a creative act. It's a building process, right? And if you switch that into the mode of like, I just have to go through and audit a bunch of code all day. It's like that's not where the joy comes from. It definitely changes the tone in a way where it's not going to attract the same kind of talent. For where the humans fit in, the line that we've used inside the company for a very long time is we've always said let the humans do the hard part, and as the technology changes, it kind of changes what the hard part is, right? And so like the hard part now should still come down to for the users of the platform. It's like building communities should be the hard part. That's the human operation of like how do you make people want to be a part of it? How do you enable them? The hard part shouldn't be to do the cleanup and do the janitorial work and remove spam and like make sure that nobody's being an asshole. Sorry, being a beep. It leaks out of me. 20 years on Reddit, and that's where we're trying to make sure that the humans can actually stick around.
Got it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the product of Reddit on the same topic. I was talking to a marketing agency last week, and he goes, "My strategy is, I create a Reddit, a subreddit, and then I use Claude to pump it full of content, like 5 articles a day for months, and then it just works." So as Reddit has been the place where keep it real, as the internet gets more like synthetic, how do you keep it real on Reddit?
So the hard part there is that it's ultimately the problem here is actually very similar to the problem of spam in general. If you think about it, but what's the model? The model is if you're trying to push content, you're trying to find a way where you can get free advertising without paying the business, right? Like for whatever it ends up being. And fortunately, this is a place where we have a ton of experience. So we've had to kind of grow up as the internet's grown up, and therefore we've had to deal with like ramping up our countermeasures as the measures have gotten better and smarter. And now we're kind of in the arms race where like now both sides have the computer equivalent of nuclear weapons, which is LLMs, right? And so we're both able to now like they can dump a ton of content really quickly. We can clean it up really quickly. And so it's this cat and mouse game forever to kind of keep it going. And so what we're trying to do is like a combination of like make sure that our defenses are always good, make sure we kind of track these down. I love what I love more than anything else is the bragging, because the bragging also tips you off that something's going on. You can go in and find it. One of our methods that's worked really well over the years, I find very satisfying. I actually really like the cat and mouse game because it's very kind of enjoyable. Is you want to waste their time and their money, and so what you do is you let them think they're succeeding in building out their giant network, and then when they like do the thing that's supposed to be the payload dropping, you just burn the whole thing down as one big go. And it's just so fun to watch. We did something recently where one of the things that's been pretty like perennial on Reddit is like the idea of like buying votes. Like if you want to push your content, you should be able to buy votes. And what we've been doing for a very long time is actually like my joke here is that on Reddit we count every vote, but that doesn't mean that every vote counts. And so what we started doing though is we started actually recently we started unwinding votes that we found that were cheating. And of course, we have spies in the forums where they're all talking. And it was really fun to see them all being like, hey, is anyone noticing that their campaigns aren't working anymore? I've got customers that are really mad because I can't buy votes for them anymore. What's going on? We really need to have like a Skunkworks project to solve this. It's just like, oh, so wonderful. But really, at the end of the day, it is a lot of, it's a lot of just like, it's an arms race is the best way to describe it.
Whew. Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit. you were there at the very beginning. I think you were in the first YC class. You were, one of the founding members of Reddit. You also have been a founder of Hipmunk. So there's a lot of small companies here, or young companies. Thinking back to those early days, like you plotted a course that proved successful. What advice would you give for those companies?
Oh boy. Okay. I would say to start with, that pit in your stomach feeling of free fall is perfectly normal. You're doing okay. Another one I would give is probably similar advice that I give to people I find are going to be new parents, which is that now that you have a company, everyone is going to give you advice about what you should do. You'll figure it out, right? You're gonna take the advice, incorporate it into all the other advice, which has probably been mutually exclusive, and find your own path. I'd also say the most helpful thing I can say here probably is honestly, I've found that you really can't honestly understate the power of just good old-fashioned luck in a startup. Sometimes you've got a great idea and you've got great execution, and the timing was just plain wrong, and that's not a you thing. That's just the market you're in. Equivalently, I have seen some companies succeed that I've thought, how on earth does this company exist? I'm not going to name names. That would be really dangerous on a stage. But still, it's like there might be a time for your idea, even if it isn't now. So don't be disheartened. Also, to the point of the slide of only 3% of startups get funded in the seed stage, it's like a shots on goal problem. Like if it doesn't work out, try again, something different. Also, start to do this kind of thing. Build the network. Knowing people who are in the same space. That was actually kind of one of the fun parts about being in Y Combinator was it wasn't just the access to mentors, it was the access to other people going through the same process at the same time. And just being able to have a group commiseration session were actually fantastic.
Going back to the luck and making your own luck, can you talk about the early days of Reddit and how you guys plowed forward to keep going?
Oh yeah, so to start with, obvious statement. We had no idea what we were doing. We were trying to build a technical company. This is 2005. This is actually still in the hangover of the .com bust, and so no one was doing startups at that point. But at the same time, it was we were also a heck of a lot younger. I'll say that much. Mid-20s are a fantastic time. You're basically indestructible. So you can work those the 12-hour days and actually everything works out. But I would say that what was nice about those times were that we did in hindsight make a bunch of choices which ended up being good ones for the product. And it was one of those things that at the time it was we weren't trying to build something that was going to last for 20 years. We were trying to build something that was going to last for the next month. And that maybe we'd start seeing some traction, and that maybe that next month would be, deal with the current set of problems, get over this next hump, make good decisions, move on to the next problem, and just keep iterating. And the nice thing is, a lot of those early decisions ended up sticking. We made some early decisions about how we treated voting, and that actually worked out really well. We made some really early decisions on how we decided to do commenting on Reddit and how do we sort the threads. Those decisions have lasted, in some cases, for 15 plus years before we actually rebuilt them or built something different. The other thing, though, that I would say is that in the early days, we did a lot of rebuilding also. This is in this case, it's a software company, so rebuilding is a lot cheaper than it is for something durable. But there was a certain acceptance of the fact that what we had today might not last until tomorrow. And so what's our horizon for acceptable? And that ended up being a few months before we'd actually go through and start rooting out that needs to be shored up, it needs to be rebuilt, that's about to topple. How are we going to do this properly?
Just going on that, you survived where there's a lot of other social companies that failed. What was it? Some of the product pieces that you put together, or what do you think? What do you attribute to that?
I already invoked luck, so I'll skip that one for now. I'll say pure unadulterated talent and vision. Obviously, is the answer. No, it was a really crowded space. Just to set it in perspective, 2005 was Facebook was founded in 2004. Twitter was founded in 2006. It was actually a crowded social space. There was a lot of random companies that were coming up, kind of building something social media-y. I don't think social media was coined as a term until a couple of years later, 07 or 08. And so it was just more like another way to interact with kind of news. I think that ultimately it goes back to, we made a couple of decisions. Reddit at its base is kind of the best encapsulation of the 90s style internet forum that you could find. We just kind of took all the best of that and we built it into Reddit. And we added some nice voting mechanisms, we had some nice sorting mechanisms, and we ultimately made it about communities. But we didn't even ourselves start talking about communities until much later when we actually realized what we had built. Like we were thinking of it in terms of like, oh, these are kind of like chat channels or these are kind of like forums, right? Like the community model is actually what we built. And ultimately but we did this in a way that actually was very contrarian. Like we believed that early on that like we didn't want to have real names attached to people. We wanted everyone to be pseudonymous. We did want to have people have the ability to downvote stuff and say like nope on things, as opposed to everything's a like, everything's a star, everything's like better. We were contrarian for a very long time, but it's the model over time has proven out. And it's just been a kind of a continuous slow compounding growth. Funny enough, Reddit is a platform that generates virality. It itself is not viral. The loops are very slow on the platform, and that's always meant that for us, we've had to be very kind of like deliberate about kind of feeding the engine, letting it grow, kind of deliberately compounding. Whereas we've seen other companies just kind of like break off and then subsequently crash even in the time where we've been sort of steadily growing.
Interesting. And so we've talked, about engineering, about product, and features. How much of that, the product success, comes from, the people and the culture that you set up? And can you talk a little bit about the Reddit culture and what's unique about it?
Yeah, I think for the culture we set up, we've got a. It's funny because so the platform has an intrinsic sort of snarkiness, which of course feeds into the culture of the company. That you can't avoid that. But at the same time, we actually have more of a bias towards like humility to some extent on the engineering side. Like we look for people who actually like the smartest people I've ever worked with. Oftentimes are the ones who are the most humble about their skills, because the more you know about your field, the more you know about what you don't know. And like that creates this kind of loop of like the most senior experts typically are generally pretty nice people who like know their stuff, but they'll admit that they don't know things. And you're just kind of thinking like, how could you've been doing this for 20 years? How can you not know things? It's like, well, I have a view of all the stuff I don't know. I mean, I know where my edges are, as opposed to somebody who's fresh in the business. I often try to invoke. There's a fallacy called Dunning-Kruger, which I always invoke here, which is like if you do a graph of almost experience versus confidence, it has initially this humongous peak, which is usually referred to as Mount Stupid, which is you just walked into some new field and you're like, oh, I clearly know. I learned a fact about this field. I clearly know everything there is to know about this field. How hard could it be? And the answer is, if it's a field, it's probably pretty hard. And then it's followed by the drop in the graph, which is called the pit of despair. And then you spend the rest of your career climbing back up to some level of confidence, which is never quite as high as Mount Stupid. We try to find those people who kind of hopefully skip over that hump as much as possible. We also have one of our values is we have two main values that have stuck around for a very long time. We've iterated our values over the years, but the two that have stuck around have been remember the human, which is as much about remembering that there are people on the other side of the screen who you're building for, in addition to remember your coworkers, remember that there's other people have feelings, and then evolve. I know it's a little bit trite these days, but we've had it for a very long time, which is what we need tomorrow might not be what we need today. Be ready to pivot.
All right, for the last question, I want to go to kind of a different spot. And this is, you and I saw you at the Hipmunk phase, and so I know you've worked at a small company.
We've clashed at travel at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of talk today about, starting a company, and with AI, you could keep it 1, 2, 3, 5 people and just do everything with AI. I'm curious your take, because you've seen the power of AI. Like, what is your thoughts on that?
So I think in talking to friends who are doing the startup thing again, the interesting bit that's coming out, and especially on the software side, is that when you don't have, what I've found myself is that AI-driven code development, when you have a completely greenfield problem, like it's a brand new thing, is extremely powerful, right? You can build a prototype instantly. You have no technical debt to base it on top of. You can just get your prototype up and ready to go, which actually means from a product standpoint, it's really powerful too. You can have PMs who just go and build the prototype. You don't need an engineer there. You can have designers do the same thing. It gets a lot harder when you have more, as you get more code and more legacy. Now you have this complex problem where the AI has to also understand your code base, right? But what I've seen though is the new thing for companies has been that initial group of engineers are each doing the work of about 4 to 5 engineers' jobs back in my day. And that also means that the scaling of the company is a little bit different, right? Because if you think about it, when you start off with like a 5-person startup, it's a small family. Like everyone already knows whatever everyone else is doing. And then it's not until you get to the point of like, usually historically again, like 20, 30 engineers where you have to think about like, oh, I need to think about the strategy here. I need to basically better coordinate on what everyone's working on because there's enough people here. I have to like, I need managers. I probably need HR. Like I need the core of the business has to pop in. That strategic role is now pushing itself earlier in the stage of the startup because you have 5 people who are generating the output of 25. And so they're also having a lot more trouble coordinating because there's so much wider spread each. And so it'll be interesting to see how startups end up kind of scaling at that point when you have this like kind of, it's, you know, if every person ends up being less of an IC engineer and more of like an LLM manager where they've got this like their fleet of agents running around behind the scenes, it'll be really interesting to see how that scales.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go, what would you say to the people who haven't really used Reddit before? What would you advise them to go do to get hooked or to really see the power?
It's been really hard to get people hooked. So the thing about Reddit is extremely broad. So you can think of it as it's a like I said, it's for those of us who are 80s or 90s kids. It is really the internet forms of your modern take on them. And so what you have is these communities that are based on topics and interests where anyone can kind of like you can talk about whatever it happens to be. It goes all the way from broad discussions of like pictures of cats, gaming forums, discussions of hobbies, the latest Bravo TV show you might want to talk about, down to the most obscure hobby you can ever imagine that there's a community on the platform. Like it's like, you like some particular variety of random succulents that only grow in the headlands. I guarantee you there's a community about it. And the hard part ends up just being like what we've found with people who use Reddit, it's like they always have the same story of how they went from using Reddit to being a Reddit user, which is, I kind of bounced off of it a bunch of times. And then I found this thing, and I discovered that I was there every day. And that thing is always different and very personal. And so a lot of our work has been to try to figure out how do you get to that thing. But I would say like the advantage of it is like, it's a very human place. Like it's actually a place where everyone is, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Everybody is anonymous. But that actually leads to better behavior than people with their personal name attached to it, wildly enough. Because they have no reason to be a poser. Like, what are they going to do? They're going to make something up? It's like kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, even the Marin subreddit is actually pretty interesting.
Pretty hilarious, too, honestly. Like, I do enjoy the Marin subreddit.
Yeah, me too. All right, well, thank you very much. Great to
Glad
see you.